Welcome to the Verdin Verdict Sports Show. Hope everybody's having a good Monday. Week 11 of college football, LSU versus Alabama. College game day. Really can't get better than this, at least if you're an LSU fan. Got a couple of big notes for you from Brian Kelly's press conference. We'll be doing our SEC ranking update, our SEC grades as we do every Monday. A little bit of an AP poll reaction. They got a couple of interesting things. And then some Saints news that I'm sure everybody is well aware of. We'll kind of give our reaction to that at the end of the stream, just the implications that could potentially have for New Orleans going forward, what they should do, who they should look at hiring, and if it's going to help turn the team around. First things first, just announced a few minutes ago, LSU is going to be playing Florida on the road at 2:30 p.m. You're going to get a little bit of a day game. After that, I'm pretty sure it'll be night games only. Final games will all be at Tiger Stadium. Injury news, Garrett Dellinger will be out versus Alabama. He just had a tightrope surgery on his ankle. According to Brian Kelly, most likely the starter will be Paul Mbunga. You saw him get in during Texas A&M, and I think he's going to be confident. I think he's ready. Put on a good performance. His mindset has been good. I think he's prepared for a moment like this. And we're going to be excited to see Paul get out there and just show us what he's capable of. CJ Daniels, he's progressing. You don't have too big of an update on it. Coach Kelly said you don't have to give one, so he ain't. But he was talking about him just, he's a little better than he was against A&M, put it that way. Obviously, he started the first half, couldn't get back out, couldn't answer the bell for the halftime. Second half, he was out in a boot. But going forward, it's potential. There's a chance he could play. And for Garrett Dellinger, there's a chance that he could play versus Florida as well. So it could potentially be, a 2-week hiatus for your left guard. Really just, a brief overview of Alabama before we break it down on Wednesday and Friday. Coach Kelly was talking about how they just have no weaknesses, simply put. No weaknesses in really any position group. They're pretty solid across the board. You can credit a lot of things for that. First and foremost, obviously, Nick Saban has built a powerhouse, a dynasty, whatever you want to call it. Blue blood. Alabama's been it for a while. They're the measuring stick. And it's not going to fall away under a year, obviously. It hasn't. Kalen DeBoer's kind of, transitioned pretty well. They've had bumps. They've lost to Vandy. They've lost to Tennessee, so they're human. But they do have talent. They do have the ability to beat LSU. Obviously, Vegas has them favored. And honestly, I agree with it. I don't think LSU's in a position to be the favorite. Yeah, you're at home. Yeah, it's at night. Yeah, you beat them last time they came. But just with what I've seen, what have you done for me recently? It hadn't been too much. The A&M game, yeah, it was a little bit of a bad taste in your mouth. But the fact that you led, the fact that a backup quarterback came in and just absolutely dismantled you while only throwing 2 times, it worried a lot of people. So this week is going to be a big test for LSU. How far can you really go this season? If you can't make it out of Saturday with a W, your college football playoff hopes are dead. Of course, you can, start looking to maybe a ReliaQuest Bowl again, something like that. I think Alabama giving you your third L, it's all but over. If you win, you're still going to have to get lucky. You're still going to have a couple things fall your way. We'll break that down a little bit. But talking about Jalen Milroe, obviously he's a great quarterback. Here's a quick stat comparison. Garrett Nussmeier second in SEC in passing yards and in passing touchdowns. Jalen Milroe fifth in passing yards, sixth in passing touchdowns. Now, it's an interesting, thing to look at. Now, we do have to, I want to kind of put some context on this. Obviously, Alabama running way more. Obviously, Jalen Milroe is a lot more mobile and a lot more diverse, at least with his skills. So Nussmeier leading in pass yards, leading in pass touchdowns, it kind of makes it seem like he's a way better quarterback, and it might not be the case. You could be in for a pretty close battle. I think both quarterbacks are really talented in their own way. Jalen kind of just is able to make the defense, I'm not going to say uncertain or just confused, but there's a lot of elements to his game at least. And Coach Kelly kind of talked about how he evolved so much from last season, where you kind of really didn't know what you were going to get with him. Now it's a lot more consistent. He's a lot more comfortable, and it begged the question to me: if he's a lot more consistent, he's a lot more comfortable, and you've seen him before as of last year, does it help the defense out a little bit? Does Blake Baker kind of know what to expect, if you will? I mean, he's coming from an SEC school. He obviously has run in to Alabama before. I think you could be in a spot where maybe playing a Marcel Reed and A&M right before your bye week helps you out. You got that taste in your mouth. You got that experience, live game experience at that. You go into the open week and you can just study that film and really purge on what you did wrong. And you pretty much have the same scheme coming into Tiger Stadium on Saturday. Now, it'll be very interesting to see what direction they go in, how they're able to handle it. Obviously, there's going to have to be a spy. You're going to have some pocket containment. You're not going to be able to let Jalen Milroe break one off on you when you're covering all your receivers downfield. It's going to have to be really one of the best defensive plans LSU has put together all season. Coach Kelly made a note. He was kind of talking about just the pressure, the added stakes of this game. Obviously, how if you lose, you're out. And he just kind of was saying every game at this point is an elimination game. You have to play your best at all times. At this point in the season, you can't drop one at all. Even if you have one loss, two losses, whatever the case may be, you have to have that mindset regardless. For the offensive side of things, LSU, the plan is at least to just try to create a little more uncertainty. Naturally, everybody knows the run game woes, and we got a crazy statistic here. We're going to drop off soon. But all in all, they've been working on the screen game, misdirection with some motion, trying to get the run game going because Garrett Nussmeier needs help. He's trying to do everything right now. That's why he's been put in a spot where, turnovers are becoming abundant and just, everything kind of crumbled the way it did on the road in College Station. LSU on the ground only has 12 touchdowns and 922 yards. Those are both the lowest totals in the Southeastern Conference. LSU is also the only SEC team under 1,000 rushing yards. Out of the 133 teams that ESPN is tracking statistics for at the FBS level, LSU is number 121 in the rushing game. That's horrible. Last season, you were at that rank in terms of your defense, and everyone's like, oh, well, this is what's holding LSU back. If you have to find something that's holding LSU back this season, this year, at this point in time, it's the running game. The passing game is not horrible. I mean, Garrett Nussmeier is number 2 in the SEC in both of your most important categories, yards and touchdowns. But then you're last in yards and touchdowns and run game. That's a horrible compliment to each other. It's an insult. It's not a compliment at all. It's why the offense is dragging. It's why LSU is going to have to 100% answer this weekend. I believe their biggest game on the ground was like 230, 240 against South Alabama. Other than that, it's been kind of a lot of what you saw against A&M. 40, 50-yard games where not a lot of people are getting active. Here is the thing, though. It's not necessarily just as much of a lack of production as much as it could be, some poor play calling, if you will, for lack of a better, word or phrase. I think they're having some of the lowest attempts in the SEC as well per game. Obviously, they have the lowest yards per game. I think they're only averaging about 123, and they've gone very under that. I mean, last week he had like 20 to 30 yards on the ground. I think you're just going to have to try to get obviously more creative, but you're going to have to not just get away from it if it isn't working. You're going to have to keep trying to get those attempts out there. You're in week 11 and you have no run game. You have no balance. You really don't have anything to lean on, and that's one of your biggest red flags. And it probably is the biggest red flag you could have besides an injury or, other things that quite frankly they do have a good bit of. But when you're not able to create or save your quarterback, and when you're one-dimensional, when everybody knows what you're going to have to do to get the ball down the field, you're handcuffing yourself, and you're going to put yourself in a situation where teams like A&M, even South Carolina, can get you really close to a point where you're about to lose. Ole Miss, you can say the same thing. There's a couple of games this season where LSU just needed a little more oomph on that offensive side of things, and hopefully the running game picking things up can be what they needed. Moving into the SEC ranking update, then we'll do our grades right after. 4 teams are ahead of LSU, I would believe. I think it would be Georgia, Texas, Tennessee, Alabama. A&M probably, but I think with them losing to South Carolina and having Texas on the schedule, I'm pretty optimistic they'll get their 3rd loss and they'll probably drop outside that top 4. Tennessee, same thing. They got Georgia. And I feel like the top 4 conversation, just to kind of add some clarity to it, it's really important because more than likely the college football playoff will have 4 SEC teams. If you look at it right now, you got 4 in the top 12 currently with this AP poll. I'm not sure if it's guaranteed you're going to get all 4. I think at the lowest you get 3. But with that being said, the runner-up, the champion, and then you get an outlier in the SEC that'll probably sneak their way in there. If LSU plays their cards right, beats Alabama, has A&M lose to Texas, and Tennessee drops one to Georgia, you've got a pretty good argument to be that team that sneaks their way in. Maybe, you don't get to go to Atlanta. Probably not. It's probably going to be a Georgia and a Texas, or, if A&M can somehow beat Texas, maybe they slide in there, but I think LSU's best chance right now is going to have to be that underdog outlier that just somehow finds their way in. Lastly, with the SEC update, Greg Sankey with an interesting email, with an interesting change, if you will, to protocol. There's been a lot of fake injuries, or we ain't gonna call them fake, but there's been a lot of suspicious injuries in the SEC. They got a new rule adjustment. I'll be honest, my initial reaction to it is light. I mean, you've got to have 3 offenses before your head coach gets suspended or anything major like that happens. I feel like that would probably be your second offense, obviously not your first, but you got to do it 3 times to be able to actually get a major consequence, if you will. I think if this doesn't change, if you still kind of see it a little bit at the SEC level, I'm sure that the punishments, the consequences, they're going to keep growing. They're going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Let's move on to our SEC grades. We do this every Monday. It's an interesting segment. We give 1A, B, C, D, and F accordingly to 5 SEC teams that have, quite frankly, earned that grade. It's all subjective. We can talk about it in the comments if you disagree. Let's start it off, though. The F. We got to give it to our boys at Texas A&M. I mean, you went on the road. You lost 20-44 to South Carolina. It was a complete collapse. I think, the Texas game, like we said earlier, it could kill A&M's college football playoff hopes. I don't know. I think a third loss is about as detrimental as anything. Here's the question I want to ask. I'm going to pose this to y'all. If you want to respond in the comments, go right ahead. Does LSU either win or have a complete different game if you game plan for Marcel Reed? Was A&M strictly the better team? Or if LSU knew they were playing against a mobile quarterback like Marcel and not a Connor Wigman, is that game completely different? It's kind of hard to say it's not just by seeing how A&M performed against South Carolina, and we're going to have to keep a close eye on it going forward to kind of have a better, objective analysis. But I just think with what you've seen a week later after that game, it made me wonder, LSU could be in a lot different situation right now if they kind of knew what they were getting themselves into. D, Georgia. A lot of people are confused now. Georgia won. How did they get a D? Oh my God, Carson Beck, you got to clean up the play. It's sloppy, first off. The DJ Lagway injury to the hamstring, that saved you, quite frankly, because the entire feel of that game changed, at least in my opinion, after that injury. And, God bless him. Hopefully he's able to get back out there on the field. But here's a horrible, horrible stat that we dug up on Carson Beck. He has 11 interceptions in the last 5 games. Matter of fact, 4 of his last 5 games, he's thrown multiple picks. 3 out of the last 5 games, he's thrown 3. That's a statistic that you just want to hide your head in a pillow and 100% forget about. If you're Kirby Smart and you're thinking about Carson Beck, you're thinking about your offense, you're thinking about just the overall efficiency, you have a major issue on your hands. If you want to be a college football playoff contender, a national championship contender, and just stay an SEC contender, you got to clean up the play. Because one of the sloppiest teams in Florida almost caught you lacking. That's all I got to say. Carson Beck was giving freebies away like they were trick-or-treating on Halloween. It was one of those moments where it was making me think, can he be an elite quarterback? Can this team be in a bright light moment? And he keep the ball on the offensive side? I don't know. It's going to be interesting. If they play tough defense, like a Texas, like anybody in one of those big-time playoff implication games, you could be in for a rude awakening, but that's just my take on it. 34-20 W, by the way. They didn't win by 2 possessions. It was sloppy. It was ugly. C, I'll give it to Ole Miss, 63-31 win over Arkansas. 63 points tied their school record. Shout out Lane. Hey, he must be feeling some type of way. Well, you heard him talking. Oh, we don't get no night games. Oh, LSU gets to play at night all the time. Must be nice. We heard all the slander. Guess what? He turned it into motivation. He must have turned it into some purpose. Jackson Dart, 500-plus yards, I believe 6 passing touchdowns. I mean, they had a hell of a game. I'll be honest, it might be one of the most underrated SEC teams. There is one team, though, that I think is a little more underrated, and we gave them a B this week. South Carolina, 44-20 win, like we said, over A&M. Big victory for them. Help LSU out. Finally get to rush the field, because when LSU came to town and College Game Day was in attendance, the fans got a little overzealous. They started running down from their student section, spiraling down the ramp. Oh, we're getting to rush your field. Flash forward a few minutes later, shanked kick. LSU survives a 17-0 deficit, and they have to stay in the stands. This past weekend, it was completely different. You saw them run down. Obviously, this lead was too hard to choke and slip away. And A&M goes down, get their first SEC loss. Another thing I want to say before I close out this South Carolina, flower session. Shane Beamer's building something special. I think South Carolina can be a very, very big player in the SEC going forward. I wouldn't be surprised to see top recruits, transfers, and just a lot of big names point their attention towards South Carolina. I mean, not only are they winning big games, not only is the environment looking rambunctious, but he's a great player's coach. He trusts in his guys, and it looks like the camaraderie, the chemistry, it's unique. I haven't really seen much like it in the SEC, and when you have something like that, and when you bring something like that to the table, similar to a Coach Prime or even a Nick Saban, I mean, that's what helps you stand out. That's what brings, that X factor, if you will, to the table in that recruiting world. And in NIL and just this overall landscape of college football, you need every single thing that's going to set yourself apart from the pack. And I think South Carolina has kind of stacked some days towards it. If they held on against LSU and didn't give up that 17-0 lead, you'd be in an entirely different situation. They would only have 2 losses. You would be beating 2 of the top SEC teams. It will be interesting. That close game versus Alabama as well. I mean, they've had a lot of moments this season where they were just so close. I mean, the next 2-3 years, I think South Carolina can really push toward the top of this conference. That's my hot take. Lastly, the A, SEC. Who got the A for this week? None other than Vandy. They beat Auburn 17-7. I believe it was the first time since 1900 something. They keep breaking records. Diego Pavia, 4th in SEC in touchdowns. He only has 3 interceptions all year. You have other quarterbacks in the SEC throwing 3 in a game. He only has 3 all season. So shout out to him. When he comes to LSU, it's going to be interesting. Close game versus Texas. Beat Alabama. Now they're beating Auburn. I think Vandy's a lot better than a lot of people are giving him credit for. So this will be an interesting moment after, we play Alabama, you go play Florida, and you come back home, and you got to see what Vandy has in store for you. It's the gauntlet. They call it that for a reason. It's definitely a deserved name. AP poll reaction, let's give you a couple of takeaways from that. First things first, Boise State is number 12. Here's all I got to ask. They're the only Mountain West Conference team that's top 25. Obviously, they only have 1 loss. It's to Oregon. They kind of had an all right performance, but the number 1 team in the country is going to do you kind of the way you expect. It's a little gap of competition, so we're going to ignore that one. My question is, if Boise State wins that conference championship, how do you pull them out of a G4 spot? How do they not get into the college football playoff? And if they do get into the college football playoff at this point, does that bolster Ashton Genty's Heisman odds? We'll break it more, down more on Wednesday, but I think at number 12 in the AP poll, Boise State could really make some noise if they keep climbing. Will they get into the college football playoff? Who knows? I think we're going to have some oddball teams get in, especially in your first year of the expansion. So it'll be interesting. I think Ashton Genty could potentially bolster his chance, as it really didn't seem like he could at the beginning of the year. It didn't seem like they'd be able to get over that hump, over that edge. As of right now, number 12 in the AP poll. It's worth something. SEC, interesting note, they have the most teams in the Week 11 AP poll. SEC has 8 teams in the top 25. The ACC is 5. Big 10, 4. Big 12, 4. LSU's back above Texas A&M a week after losing. Had nothing last week. A&M obviously drops to South Carolina. And my final takeaway for the AP poll is, where is South Carolina? They're not in the top 25. That could put the SEC at the 9th team that they'd have ranked. I feel like they deserved it after this past week. Like we said, they're building something special. They're kind of at a point now where every week you got to give them, the benefit of the doubt. You can't really underrate them. You can't really expect them to just lay over at this point. I think you're in for a little bit of an interesting end of the year. It could be cool to see what they build and they turn into in Columbia. Real quick, before we talk about the Saints and wrap this up, I want to shout out Happy Dad. You know the drill. Gluten-free, no artificial flavors, low in sugar. You know where to get them. You're grocery shopping, you're out at Walmart, Rouse's, Albertsons, stop by the liquor aisle, grab you a case of Happy Dad. Tell them Verdin Verdict sent you. If you want some merch, go click our link in the description. We got a code for you that'll give you 15% off. Code Verdin15 at checkout. Go get all your Happy Dad gear. Thanks to the guys again for sponsoring us throughout the college football season. So let's transition from college football to the NFL real quick. We got a bombshell today. We don't talk about the NFL much, but we're going to have to start picking it up, especially now that the Saints are in one of the stickiest situations the Saints have really been in since, Drew Brees retired, Sean Payton retired. Now Dennis Allen gets fired. Their special teams coach is going to take over. 7 straight losses. That's insane. You go from 2-0 to all of a sudden, knife in the heart. All I want to say is this. You can go back and look. I'm sure we'll clip it later on. Well, we talked with G Sports. We were talking about the Saints. We were previewing the Saints and Falcons at one point, and I did make a comment saying that the winner of this game could potentially be the mover and shaker in the division. Obviously, the Falcons have kind of pulled away. They're at 6-3. Bucks are around 500, and the Saints have completely shot themselves in the foot. The Saints are going to have no chance in the playoffs. All they can do is hope that they keep tanking and losing these games, because now you're going to get a top 3 pick. Now you could potentially replace Derek Carr, and that kind of parlays into my next question. Is Mickey Loomis safe? Is Derek Carr safe? Like, what kind of feel is around the organization now at this point? Are you cleaning everything up? Dennis Allen can't be the only card to fall. It's just my opinion. I don't think Derek Carr is going to get traded away just because that contract is horrible. And then you're in a situation where you're going to have to pay him out. If you pay him out, just keep him on the damn team. You got to give him money. More than likely, Derek Carr's here to stay. I hate to break it to you. Now, Mickey Loomis, this is where it gets interesting. He's whiffed on the Patrick Mahomes, on Lamar Jackson. It might not all be on his shoulders, but he's been the GM in the position while those moments have happened and came and gone. Do you give him the opportunity to do it one more time with a top 5, potential top 3 pick in this year's draft if things keep churning the way it's churning? Does Mickey Loomis stay in New Orleans? That's my big question. Also, who do they get? I mean, there's been rumors all over the place. They got Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson getting rumored. First thing I thought of is Bill Belichick interested? And do the Saints even humor that? Do they even kind of see and play around with that idea? I mean, he is obviously one of the greatest coaches of all time, but to what extent is New Orleans, are they desperate for a coach? Are they desperate to make a move? What the overall, vibe of that front office is going to have to keep being felt out. I want to see if names keep dropping. I want to see what direction they're trying to go in. For the time being, I'm sure, quite frankly, even if they don't want to admit it or not, the focus right now is on getting a top draft pick. And then once you do that, you're going to have to protect it. I think you're going to have to make sure you got the right people in place making the decisions, and you got full confidence in them going forward. This week on Wednesday, we'll be live again at 1 p.m. talking LSU versus Alabama. Be giving you your players to watch, our key notes and reports, and we'll be doing our final Heisman watch. Then Friday at 3:30, we'll be breaking down the game. Hopefully G Sports can join. I believe he should. LSU versus Alabama, one of the biggest games we got all season. Then obviously we'll have our live coverage Saturday. I'll be up pretty early trying to be out there for College Game Day. Who knows what's in store? But we'll be there covering it, and we'll be there live on the field for LSU and Alabama, giving our full coverage, full highlights, and our post-game show right after on the field. Appreciate everybody for joining the stream. Hit the like button on the way out. Hit the subscribe button so you're there Wednesday at 1 o'clock, and y'all have a good rest of your Monday.